Here we go.
You see, I had a grand vision. A self-sustaining trip across the nation that structures time to visit family and friends, opens the opportunity to get a hot chicken sandwich, gives me a clear day to quit a job I don't like, forces me to break some habits, changes my character, makes me a better man, and hey, maybe gets me a cool YouTube video too. Specifically, I would travel, working DoorDash shifts along the way up to Oregon, back down and east through Nashville, then down to my childhood hometown in Florida, back through Texas and home 28 days later, preferably without the zombie apocalypse. Throughout this journey, I would not default to mindlessly watching videos. Instead, I would read and write. I would journal how I developed a vision where I left this journey better than I entered it. But I had quite the journey to go before that. I was kind of tired. I just wanted to lay a ton in Layton, but kept going. Enjoying pleasant view, as I drove on. Drove on past Ida home, because, well, it's Ida, not my home. Drove past Boise, shouting, "Boys, see ya later." I then drove right past Echo. Then past Boardman, because I'm not bored, man. This is adventure. Oh, okay. Driving for 9 hours, maybe a little bit bored, though more so tired. But I had a little more to go, through Sunnyside to Sunset, and the first day on this adventure came to a close. Something I learned from a teacher of mine early on in life is to define terms. The definition I found for adventure was fairly universal. Adventure, an unusual, exciting, typically hazardous experience or activity. Adventure most often comes with risk. Oftentimes it comes with putting something on the line, whether that's reputation, money, or your physical body in the case of something like skydiving. And by putting something on the line, my thought process is that you are usually more emotionally invested in that thing. As soon as something is on the line, you are more invested in the project and you will work harder and you will perform at your best. Betting, say on a sports game, does just that. It heightens what you feel, whether they win or lose. You are more invested in the game. When you are adventuring, you're developing yourself. You're doing things that you haven't done. But what then about the moments when adventure brings you face to face with something you cannot defeat? Say a giant dragon, or say maybe a car that's having problems. Not that I would know anything about that. I believe that there are 4 options. 1. You flee, grow, return, and then conquer. Returning to slay the dragon, or to use my car example again, learning how to repair a car and returning and doing that. Another thing that I thought of is you could run and hide, as Puss in Boots does from death in Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. Another thing that I thought is that at times you will lose. It is one of the dangers of adventure. And my final thought on this is that sometimes adventuring will reveal strengths that you didn't know that you had or had developed enough to actually perform well. The second thought I had was of Joseph Campbell's A Hero's Journey, though I didn't have a ton of specific things to say about it. The hero's journey is a chart that describes the overall arc of many fictional stories, and while there are more steps in fiction, I'll generalize it here, there are a lot of videos that delve deeper into it that you can look into if you're interested. Here, though, the primary steps are the call to adventure, maybe a desire or an offer, the threshold, the moment you're actually in the world of the unknown, in my case, the moment I hit the road, the general arc of challenges and temptations, enemy fire, distractions, or any other obstacle. Then the abyss or nadir, the lowest of lows. Then comes a transformation and atonement. The protagonist changes and makes up for his mistakes, and a return, which is the return. The time soon came, and I was on the road again. Beautiful views surrounding me. I then drove right past Echo. And got to say hi to an old friend.
See? Told you I'd see him again.
I moved to the passenger seat and slept the night away. Well, mostly.
Well, one uncomfortable night of sleep later. Took me a while to figure out how to do it, but got at least a few hours of sleep, and I'm off to start another day.
Whether fully rested or not, the day started as I headed up and through the Green Mountains in Mountain Green. I then drove right past Echo. Deja vu. And took a break in a park.
I slept in my car last night, and, well, it sparked some thoughts.
What is adventure besides
The leaving behind of the safe, known, and comfortable.
I, for one, can guarantee that mine at least was uncomfortable. Uncomfortable seems more generally true than hazardous, not because there is no hazard, but because it's the feeling of hazard. Going back to skydiving, you have a parachute that 99.999% of the time will work, but yet it still brings that rush of hazard and adventure. Yes, of course, something could go wrong, but it's unlikely, and yet it's still adventurous. But is it good to be uncomfortable? An analogy that makes sense to me is going to the gym. Going to the gym is uncomfortable. It would be much easier and more comfortable to stay at home. And yet, going to the gym will cause your muscles to develop and grow. At least when done in moderation. Spending literally 100% of your life lifting will not bring you growth. Your muscles will simply become unusable. Adventure is much the same. Adventure, push yourself to grow and maintain your character, and then rest, recover, to be able to do it again. As one's comfort zone grows, they are able to handle more and more with ease, making what would be uncomfortably difficult for one, comfortable, even easy to one who has adventured beyond that point. Speaking of beyond that point, I chugged along, shouting, and only my family will find this funny, "Hi, Fort Bridger's house!" Then drove through Little America, and I can confirm, much smaller than actual America. It's 7.8 miles to America's 3.79 million miles. The next day, I drove through Saratoga in Saratoga.
I don't have a toga. I'm sorry, okay? Today's drive was short and I was desperate.
Nevertheless, with good puns or without, I pressed onward, enjoying a transitive verb cracker. I then drove my way to reveal the true nature of this quest. To take over the entire tri-state oil reclaimer! I mean, I saw tri-state. I had to, right? I continued, driving straight past Gona. I guess I was a goner. Going forth to ask, if I'm in Disney, where are all the overpriced snacks? The next day kicked off and I gave Hamburg its bottom bun, finally completing it as a grr hamburger. Then wondered why Oregon was stocking halfway across the nation. I remained deeply perturbed for the rest of the day, especially when I saw Overton leave my window. I was still trying to grasp it when I saw a strangely familiar building in Danville. Must have been the magic of computer editing. After all the eerie sights of the day, I was glad to drive through Hopewell, because, well, Hope's pretty neat. The next day was a shorter day, but I was confronted by a very important question. Why wasn't New Baden named New Gooden? What has brought them to such lows? What would lead someone to make this choice when it's such a hugely important decision? The questions remained. More specifically, why did I make the decision to make this trip myself? I had questions.
I feel like I am currently at a stage of doubt and questioning in my journey. Why did I want to do this so bad? Was there a more reasonable, less all or nothing way to do it? Will I really be able to cover everything, especially with the conveniences that I tend to abuse? Will I really be able to cover everything financially through DoorDash? I've been getting bored and have been turning to YouTube at times in this trip, especially today during the in-between hours of DoorDash. Generally, I'm just not getting as much reading, writing, and thinking as I had hoped. Fortunately, I do believe that these coming weeks will be what actually define this trip. Whether that makes it or breaks it. And generally, I remain hopeful.
Oh boy, can't you just see the hope emanating from me? I meant it, but there was a lot of doubt weighing on my shoulders. I awoke the next day and began driving, orienting myself to my first major stop since Oregon for a hot chicken sandwich. But that high point was just a little ways past this high point. Nevertheless, I was about 2 weeks in and ready for a break. It was during my stay in Nashville that I realized something about this adventure. How much it pitted me against myself. There were a lot of competing priorities. DoorDash and my beginning to falter finances, competing against self-discovery and my clearly lacking reading of philosophy books, including A Hero with a Thousand Faces, competing against my passion and long-term goal of writing, competing against my very structured plan of when I need to arrive in cities, and the YouTube video of it all. And here I was, 1,600 miles away from home, committed to my grand concept of a trip. Somewhere within me there was that spark of hope. But amidst all this, where was the philosophical revelation that could justify this? I didn't know as my time in Nashville came to a close, and I headed southeast past southeast, reached my day's halfway point in Centerville, gave thanks in Tai, found the El Dorado, and wondered where the salt was in Lake City, quickly arriving at my next stop, only for clear and worsening car problems, hopelessness, feelings of personal inadequacy, past demons and habits haunting me. I felt angry and not have anything but myself to be angry at. I was left grasping at strands of hope as I looked at my notes, that this really could be a turning point, because it really felt like I was at my nadir. I felt as though my options were extremely limited, likely upon my return home, finding another job I hate and working for 5, 10, until I can retire years. Genuinely, my biggest thought was, well, I guess there's a pretty good reason there's a road more traveled by. And still, somewhere within me there was a desperate desire. There was a happy or meaningful ending. Maybe just a profound discovery about myself. But what could the path to that be? The time came to hit the road again, and I quickly realized that I forgot to take photos some days as I drove far more than 8 miles for an M&M, and was minding my own business when I heard through the grapevine that it was almost good night, and thank goodness. I was tired and worried after driving right through a missile crisis. The next day I drove west through Westwood, past thistles, and returned home a changed man. Yeehaw! Or was I? I quickly found a new job that I worked for a year that I didn't care about and actively disliked, My channel stagnated for months after, and I'm only editing and posting this more than a year later. But does that mean my trip failed? In some ways, yes. But I also learned some valuable things. 1. Don't overlook the familiar. 2. You can't simply write away your character flaws. 3. Adventure can bring clarity. Don't overlook the familiar. Rarely, if ever, will there be a holy grail to find. Instead, the true treasure, to continue my analogy, is the friends made along the way. The true treasure may seem extremely ordinary, like looking up and seeing beautiful clouds in the sky. For me, this was the stories, specifically creating them. This is so dumbfoundingly obvious that it seems impossible to forget. But like a sticky note that's been on your desk for a month, or a family picture in your home, my mind became accustomed to it and sometimes forgot just how significant of a thing it was for me. So, don't overlook the familiar, the obvious, for the beasts in the sky can be breathtaking. You can't simply write away your character flaws. My creative instinct likes to write my flaws away. I'm really good at working up life plans or ways that I do X and overcome flaws, and horrible at enacting them. My mind treats flaws like light switches that can be turned off because I have a plan. But it's never that simple. A great book that helped me understand this and creativity more generally is The Mind of the Maker by Dorothy Sayers. It's very theological, but I feel like there are a few really good lessons on storytelling. One being that if an author, or God, simply fixes a character or magically removes consequences to force the story to a happy ending, without developing the character to the point they deserve those things, the story loses its magic and believability. Puss in Boots, referenced earlier, is a good example of how you can create a character who develops to the point they deserve the happy ending. Puss overcomes death, not magically, but through a clear and noticeable, and most importantly, believable change. What this meant for me, however, is that I couldn't simply leave my home and remove my flaws, especially when putting myself in situations where I am alone, tired, and bored, with the quick dopamine hit of a YouTube video simply in my pocket. Like I said, I fell short in a lot of ways, and wondered if the trip was, well, a waste. My original vision of DoorDash, philosophizing about adventure, reading, and creating stories, failed. YouTube habits took over chunks of my downtime. My long drives and short stops kept DoorDash from covering more than the expense of gas. And the whole trip made it difficult to work on but a few of my projects. In the middle of my trip, I actively wondered if this trip was nothing more than a waste of time and money. But adventure can bring clarity. Some might accuse me of coping, and it's possible it's my subconscious trying to make sure my decisions were justified. But when my car started having problems, and my grand vision of fixing myself had clearly failed, and I was feeling I had backed myself into a corner, I made the decision to focus the final stretch of my journey on developing one of my ideas. And felt the joy and peace. And coincidentally, and anecdotally, had one of my best days on DoorDash. You see, throughout the trip I'd been working on a rough idea that I had. I'd put in a little time and enjoyed the creative work. But on the 25th day of the trip, shortly after the lowest low, when I felt everything was lost, I decided to abandon my grand vision and focus on the thing I loved most, working on stories. Was this adventure necessary to bring about this discovery? No. As mentioned before, I knew this about myself. But when I was forced to choose, it made it painfully obvious that this was my choice. If I hadn't been forced to choose, I likely would be in much more of a balancing act, where I'd lost sight of what was right in front of me. Stories. I think I did need something, maybe something smaller such as a weekend trip around Utah, or a day up in the mountains, or maybe an hour of journaling while pushing myself intellectually into a corner, instead of literally. But I needed something to force a decision. So, would I recommend a pun-filled adventure driving across the nation? Probably not. But I would recommend that you set aside time to adventure and give the adventure enough weight that it can push you, refocus you. That day, I was reminded of the concept that when you make up your mind, the answer will follow. That was the day that I decided consciously what I wanted. Not an almost 8,000-mile drive, not DoorDash, not even philosophizing about adventure for philosophy's sake, though I certainly like philosophy. And once I decided that and put my back into that, not the strange juggling act I'd concocted for myself, it felt like things were working. So, while the 21st century adventure often isn't as clear as the physical realities of the 19th century adventure, where many Americans packed up their bags and left behind their lives, with technology, clear boundaries of land ownership, and ease of transport making the lines of adventure blurrier, still, the call to adventure remains open to any willing to heed it. Put something on the line. Maybe just an idea, or your understanding of the world, or your life's trajectory. A simple thought experiment. But put something on the line, and face the discomfort head on, even if it's just in your head.